Hi, happy Tuesday, everybody. It's Dr. Chris here. Welcome to my Tuesday edition of Optimal Health, Optimal Life. If you're out there and you have a question, you can put it in the chat or you can just say hi. And we've worked our way down the spine. Now we're working our way down the extremities. So today we're going to be talking about optimal wrist health. And it really does follow along with our series on the shoulder, elbow into the wrist. Now, you will hear people say, I have carpal tunnel. Well, what they really mean is, well, everybody has a carpal tunnel because it is a structure in the wrist, in the body. But what they're really trying to say is they have carpal tunnel syndrome. So we're going to be talking about that. And a few other common hand and wrist injuries that we can mention is number one, trigger finger. So these are the phalanges or fingers. The finger bones are called phalanges, and this is where the joints are that we bend our fingers. There's wire in this guy, so he doesn't bend so well. But what trigger finger is, this is, by the way, the flexor side. That's the side right here that we would bend forward. And there are tendons that connect the forearm bundle. We talked about that a little bit last week when we talked about the elbow. So if you want to go back to that, you can. But those tendons reach out to the fingers here. And when those tendons contract, they can make trigger finger, which means they kind of claw up a bit. And I won't be going into too much detail because that's really more of a medical issue, but just a few other things. You can break your wrist, and what that really means is, look here, we have 8 carpal bones, 8 wrist bones, guys. This is the back side of the hand. So when people say they broke the wrist, I'm like, well, what do you mean? Which bone did you break? But a lot of times what happens is that we fall. This is our thumb. We fall with our hand outstretched and we put more pressure on the side. So it might be this lunator scaphoid bone right here. So there's certain things we can do. Obviously, if it's a fracture, that is not a chiropractic issue. But it can mean that other things went out of alignment down the chain. And I talk about that a lot because you can't just look at one part of the body when it's connected to other parts, right? Carbometacarpal injury. Technical terms. Carpal bones, metacarpal bones, phalanges. So the carpometacarpal area is right here. I think of this more as boxer injuries, right? You're kind of flexing your wrist. Don't put your thumb in. Always put it out, by the way, if you happen to be boxing. But there might be an injury. Usually it's more to the back of the hand. Tendinitis. I talked about tendinitis versus tendinosis last week. Tendinitis is inflammation of those tendons. So similarly, as I talked about the tendons that come in here, that's usually due to overuse injuries. The other aspect that can occur is simple subluxation. That means that these 8 bones here move out of relationship with each other. They come out slightly out of place. They might come a little back, a little forward, a little side to side. It's very, very slight. But I don't know if this has ever happened to you. And it has to me sometimes, and it's crazy. I won't have done really anything. And all of a sudden, my wrist hurt so much. I just moved it the wrong way. These bones actually do move a little bit in general. I moved it the wrong way. A carpal bone went out of place. It's subluxated, and it's agonizing. It's just deep, achy pain that won't go away. It's unrelenting. I'll try to work on it myself, and invariably, not too in the far past, I had to text my daughter and be like, where are you? I really need a wrist adjustment because, hi, my hands are my life. And I wanted to get some sleep. And it's just amazing. Once that bone goes into place, it's like, oh, finally, relief. So it can be even something spontaneous like that. It doesn't have to be a big injury, but certainly you can have a fall where you fall but don't break your wrist or your hand, but you might have those vertebrae, the carpal bones going out of alignment. Or in relationship, remember, part of the wrist is, I only have one bone here, okay? I only have the radius bone. Remember, we talked about that last week. The ulnar bone is still attached to my skeleton. But we have two bones here, so it's also the relationship between that radius and the ulna. So I talked a little bit about that with the child at Yellowstone that I worked on his elbow, and it helped his wrist. So we always have to go, whenever there's a wrist problem, I go shoulder, elbow, wrist, hand. What are the connections? Maybe even neck because of that connection. So it's important to make sure everything is checked out. But let's just dive in a little bit more about this thing called carpal tunnel syndrome. What is it? Well, it means that there is a carpal tunnel here made out of a ligament. I'm going to go to my iPad and hopefully we're going to be able to see this. The magic of my highlight here. Let me get that a little bit out of the way. There we go. Wow, that is, I cannot believe it's really into that frame. Okay, so this here is a ligament that goes over those tendons, and you can see those bones. Whoop. There's the bones underneath there. So you've got the layer of the bones, the tendons, and the nerve. It's a median nerve. That's the nerve it's called. You have the median nerve and the ulnar nerve. And the median nerve comes on the inside here, and it goes out to your thumb and your index finger and middle finger, generally those three fingers in that area. So you might feel numbness or tingling or some pain there, right? Movement. Especially when you're doing tasks like maybe typing, anything that you're using the flexion part of your hand. So what happens is you have that ligament sitting over on top. And sometimes that ligament can be loose and sort of lays on top of the nerve, or sometimes it can be too tight and lay on top of the nerve. So one or the other is not going to be good because that is going to compress this median nerve that goes out to this area. So this is what carpal tunnel syndrome is. There's actually a physical phenomenon. It's not just, oh, I have wrist pain, I have carpal tunnel. So there's actually some tests that you can do in your own home to see if this might be an issue. So I'm going to show you two that you can try out. And if these are positive, then you're going to want to seek help with your friendly neighborhood chiropractor for carpal tunnel syndrome, because if there are any carpal bones out of alignment, it's going to make matters way, way worse. All right. So the first one is you take the back of your hands and you press them together. So see, I'm putting my hands in flexion. I'm pressing really hard. Does that cause any pain? Okay, if it doesn't, you may or you may not have carpal tunnel. These are just some tests that you can do to see, like, yeah, if that causes a lot of pain, you're going to definitely want to get it checked out. The other thing is tapping on this area right below where the wrist meets the hand. That's where that ligament is and that nerve lays, and you tap there. And if that causes any pain or shooting pains, then that means that that ligament can be compressing that nerve and creating carpal tunnel syndrome. So these are two great tests. I don't need to tell you the names. I won't bore you with that. But if you can do that, if those cause issues, then for sure call your chiropractor, get an appointment in. This is something that it can be helped greatly with chiropractic. So how do we get carpal tunnel syndrome? Well, a lot of people are using improper ergonomics, especially right now. So I'm on a laptop, but it's raised up so that I can see right into my laptop. If I were to type up here all day, look at how my hands are, right? That's going to put a lot of stress and tension. We never want to have our joints in a extreme range of motion for long periods of time. So what I would have to do is I would have to get an external keyboard, preferably one that's wired in and not using Bluetooth technology, just because of the EMF aspect. But then that keyboard would be down on the table, or even better, in an under table drawer, so that it's lower, so that I've got that complete ergonomic setup. And I'll post in this description the link to the ergonomic setup YouTube video that I did, so we don't have to go into detail on that. So computer use, making sure that if you are at a computer, you are ergonomically set up no matter where you are, home, work, whatever, on the go. And then the other thing would be an overuse type of thing, besides computer work, which is considered overuse, but improper use too. So something where you're using your wrists a lot, your hands a lot, those forearm muscles a lot. I go into that in the elbow talk I did last week. So again, revisit that. So working on your elbow health, forearm health is going to help your wrist health. The other susceptible group are pregnant women. Who knew? Well, ligaments all get loose in pregnant women, including the flexor retinaculum, which is what that ligament is called. And when that gets loose, it gets floppy and it can just lay on that nerve. Sometimes pregnant women also have swelling. You know, it's common, it's not normal, but it sometimes occurs. So that's another instance. And then new moms, guys, new moms. They're carrying, they're holding their babies, they're breastfeeding, everything is like this. It's all kind of caved in. And if you're not used to using your hands, using your wrists, using your forearms, then you are going to strain them. And that includes the wrist. And also with having it in this position all the time, those carpal bones, those wrist bones can kind of pop out back here and again come out of place and create more pain. So those are some instances. Some sports are going to have a greater instance of wrist issues, especially if you're using your forearm and grip. I talked about that last week with like rock climbing and aerial arts and other things where you're using a lot of grip. All right. So what can we do for this? Well, first of all, you can do stretches and exercises to help with the health of your wrist so that you are proactive in preventing this. And if it does occur, once the great inflammation dies down, so you're not in too much pain, you can start with these exercises in the rehab too. So first of all, it's just sort of like taking it into ranges of motion. So if we want to open up this area, we can do, let me do a side view. We can do things like extending our arm out and holding our fingers down. So this is called extension of the wrist. So that really stretches all the way down this front part here. The other thing you can do is flexion. So you can do the same thing and hold your arm out and pull your hand down. I like to do it from the wrist. But if you really want to try and get a little bit more range of motion, I challenge you to try to bring your thumb down to your forearm. Now, it may not go all the way, but this is a great one to do to stretch out the backside of the wrist. There's also coming into prayer pose and then bringing your elbows up and applying a little pressure. So that's a good one for extending. You can use a tennis ball or some sort of stress ball and you can squeeze it for your grip, increasing your strength. You don't want to do it so it irritates it. You just want to do it enough so that you're actually getting that strength. And again, I am going to, as I go, put more videos on. Sorry, this week I didn't get to putting any extra exercise videos on, but it will happen, I promise. Right now I'm working on a podcast launch for this Sunday. If any of you guys are out there on Sunday, I believe it's going to be 9 a.m. Pacific time, so I'll put more info out there into the world in the next couple of days. It's going to be super exciting, so look for that. Use some sort of support. So if you find that your wrist is irritated, compression can help. So either there's different types of wrist supports, and this is where your chiropractor can help guide you. Do you need something that's a little bit more flexible? A lot of times with moms, with babies, they can't wear the super stiff wired braces because they have to actually use their hands. So if you're in a job or field that you need to use your hands and your wrists, that's not going to work. That might be a good option for nighttime so you don't get your hands and wrists in some sort of weird position. But there's plenty of like neoprene-like supports that can compress the radius and the ulna together, give it a little support, make a little room there. And of course, this is all after you've been adjusted, so you know there's no carpal bones out of alignment, right? And so you can still have a little bit of flexibility, but you've got some support here. And this is another type of exercise you can do too that can be really effective if you find that your wrists are really tired. Just grab your wrist with your hand, below where the hand is, and with your other hand, obviously, and make a fist here. And I'm compressing and squeezing those bones together as I bring my wrist forward and back. And sometimes you may feel a release too. It just depends if you've got super loose ligaments, but that's a really nice way too. The other thing you may need to do, as I've said with the elbow, is you may need to have somebody digging into these forearm muscles, because all of the all of the tendons that come through your hand, they start in your forearm. So if you're not addressing your forearm while we're looking at the wrist, you might be missing half the battle. So you really have to get somebody to get in there. You can try to do it yourself if you can take the intensity, but really working into those forearm bundles. I just had this massage yesterday and I'm still like, so that is about it for our wrist health. I hope this has helped. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me through my contact information of my website or my email. And if you like this, give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, put it on your social media, whatever. And when you subscribe, then you're going to know when I put these extra exercise videos on. And then you won't miss anything. All right, everybody, have a great night, and I will see you next week when we start on hips. Bye.